Alright, since Logan is hitting theaters soon, we're gonna do a special mini-series celebrating our favorite mutants. Hello and welcome to Sci-Fi-Night. I'm your host, Sebastian Vendel Martinez, and in this first part of our little mini-series around X-Men, we're checking out the series' deeper meaning. So, on the surface, the X-Men series is more or less just a fun action sci-fi about a struggle between two different groups of mutants. One that wants revenge against humans, and the other who wants to protect them. But I'm sure many of you already know about the deeper meaning that lies underneath the surface, waiting to spring up. Just like the latent mutant powers in our heroes. Marvel released X-Men #1 in September 1963, written by Stan Lee and Jack Kirby. In it, the genes of certain humans start evolving and mutating, changing people and turning them into mutants, either with certain powers or physical changes. We follow the X-Men, a group of powerful and gifted mutants who, under Professor X's tutelage, work to try and save mutants, humans, and the world from the dangers of evil mutants, supervillains, and other dangers. However, they aren't traditional heroes, as many humans see all mutants as a danger and want them controlled, monitored, or worse. So obviously this whole mutant thing could work as a metaphor for pretty much any kind of discrimination, but to give a specific deeper meaning of the X-Men series, we kind of have to examine the context and social climate of the time it was written. In the 60s, it wasn't exactly easy to not be part of a social, cultural, or sexual norm.
What Jimmy didn't know was that Ralph was sick, a sickness that was not visible like smallpox, but no less dangerous and contagious, a sickness of the mind. You see, Ralph was a homosexual, a person who demands an intimate relationship with members of their own sex.
What the fuck is this?
For example, in 1962 there was a big scandal where police officers were actually extorting gay bar owners and demanding payment. There were so-called sodomy laws, which actually made certain sexual acts illegal even if it was between two consenting adults. And many other groups, such as those of racial and ethnic minorities, were mistreated and discriminated against as well. These factors all played a big part in the creation of the X-Men. In an interview with The Guardian in the year 2000, creator Stan Lee said the following: "It occurred to me that instead of the X-Men just being heroes that everybody admired, what if I made other people fear and suspect and actually hate them because they were different? I loved that idea. It not only made them different, but it was a good metaphor for what was happening with the civil rights movement in the country at the time." So obviously Stan Lee puts it pretty well, and those likenesses are actually way more prevalent in the film series than you might think. Let's start by checking out the mutant powers. They start manifesting around puberty, kind of like Rogue in the first X-Men film. As a young girl, her first kiss turns out to be a pretty horrific experience as she unknowingly starts sucking out her boyfriend's life force. These mutant powers, just like sexuality and sexual desire, usually start manifesting around puberty, and if one is used to a sexual norm, especially in societies and cultures that look down on those that are different, then a homosexual realization can be shocking, much like the shock that Rogue experiences while getting her first kiss. So obviously her condition makes sexual relations pretty problematic, and in most fiction as well as reality, what's normal sexual relations? Well, heterosexual relations. The way people look at and treat mutants can also be very reminiscent of how LGBT people have been and are still being treated depending on where you are. Sure, we can laugh at the anti-mutant protesters with their kill all muties signs and such, but how different are those signs from all the hate that the Westboro Baptist Church puke out on a regular basis? Yeah, those signs get less ridiculous and more sad. One scene in X-Men 1 that stands out to me to show this is the train station, where a young boy sees Cyclops and seems intrigued by him. They share a short interaction before the boy's mother reacts and moves her son out of there. This interaction in particular is, in my opinion, very powerful and could just as easily have been a boy interacting with a homosexual, a black man, someone with a kippah, veil, or turban, and it would more or less have the same meaning and effect. What we get here is an illustration of a childlike innocence regarding something different as interesting, whereas adult life, prejudice, and other factors can sort of vilify it instead. In some ways I can personally relate to this because I remember watching Aladdin as a boy and asking my parents why we didn't have all those cool buildings around in Sweden. Years later, we have people attacking and burning down mosques because of religious and cultural differences and tension. With a more neutral and accepting state of mind as a child, we don't really see what's different as dangerous. We see it just as that, different, nothing more. The same way that this child saw with Cyclops as someone just kind of cool looking, and his mother saw him as a monster. This brings us to another aspect that kind of connects the whole X-Men mutant situation with the LGBT community and the discrimination they put up with, which is the whole cure thing. So I'm sure many of us are familiar with the concept of curing homosexuality as if it was some kind of disease which just required medicine, which is of course absurd. For a very long time, homosexuality was seen as either some kind of disease or weird preference, like choosing the most ridiculous haircut out there just to fuck with people.
Stupid ass haircut.
This concept is demonstrated so well in X-Men 2.
Have you tried not being a mutant?
Yeah, now replace the word mutant with gay and you get a much more realistic conversation. The same way how people are sent to certain religious institutions to get cured of homosexuality, Sergeant Stryker sends his mutant son to Professor X in order for him to cure the mutation instead of teaching his son how to deal with it. What separates homophobia from other prejudices in this regard is that homosexuality is often not seen, as sexuality isn't usually noticed the same way as skin color or clothing. Just like how many members of the LGBT community walk among us unnoticed, so too do many of the mutants of the X-Men universe. They look just like us, they're just different, and that's what makes this symbolism so powerful and relevant. I realize that some of these connections can sound a little bit negative in regards to the LGBT community, but remember, the X-Men are gifted with awesome powers, and if you want any real-life proof of this in regards to the LGBT community, then I got 3 words for you: Neil Patrick Harris. Fuck yeah. So on top of that, the creators of the series have actually openly spoken about all the connections and connotations to the subject. First of all, director Bryan Singer identifies as openly bisexual, and Sir Ian McKellen, who plays Magneto, is openly gay. He's actually stated on record that he was persuaded to take the role of Magneto because mutants were treated with the same social prejudices as the LGBT community.
Bryan Singer, when he asked me to play Magneto, was very clear about it. He said, "You're a gay man, Ian. You know what it's like for society to point the finger at you and to pass laws which inhibit your behavior and your happiness. That's exactly what is at the heart of X-Men. And Marvel, who published the comics on which they're based, agree."
This is symbolism and an overall message that is just as relevant today as it was during the civil rights movement of the 60s. Even if a prejudice has changed somewhat.
We just didn't realize
We still love you, Bobby. It's just this mutant problem is a little
What mutant problem?
complicated.
The idea that people living among us that are just a little bit different in sexuality or belief, that they could be seen as different from us as a blue furry mutant with inhuman powers, is pretty absurd when we think about it. I mean, sure, obviously there's differences. I mean, certain mutants do kind of seem like a danger to society, but their overall underlying message is still there and still just as powerful.
But at the heart of it, there's a story of desperate human concern, which is what does society do with its minorities?
After all, think about it. If people can accept Vinnie Jones's Juggernaut, then I'm pretty sure we can accept each other.
Don't you know who I am? I'm the Juggernaut, bitch!
So that about does it for this Sci-Fi-Night special and first video of this X-Men miniseries. We hope you enjoyed it. If you've got some thoughts on the subject, leave them in the comments below, and we'll catch you guys next time.
Nej, batteriet kommer dö.